Hi everyone, we're back with more layouts in this video, picking up right where we left off in the last video. Before we dive into today's topic, let's have a quick summary on what we touched upon in the previous video. We saw flexed, rigid, and flexed. We said that flexed is a container that holds rigid and or flexed. Rigid is a fixed size. The widgets inside rigid keep their natural sizes and don't change when the window is resized. Flexed, on the other hand, is flexible and tend to take up the remaining space on the window. The widgets inside flexed tend also to take up the rest of the space on the window. We also said that layout operations are recursive. A child can itself have children. As an example, this second rigid, rather than having one widget, can be replaced with a flex with two children. Today we will see 4 layouts that help us rearrange the widgets on the window and add space between them. So we will see layout.Center to center widgets in the window or in a section of the window. Layout.Inset define margins around widgets. Layout.UniformInset, same as inset, but here it's uniform on each side of the widget. Layout.Spacer adds space between widgets. As usual, I will create a folder for this third video and copy the code file we created in video 1. I just need a small piece of code. I will add layout.Center right after creating a new context. Layout.Center.layout. The second layout with uppercase L for rendering. This function needs 2 parameters, GTX and, as usual, a function func that also need GTX of type layout.context as a parameter and returns layout.dimensions. Inside the function, we return material.button. I will set the text of the button to centered button. I will need to declare the button as usual. I will also need to render the button by adding layout and GTX as a parameter. Let's delete material.label we've got from the first video. We don't need to have full screen window, so we will delete it. Let's compile the code and run the application. The result is a button in the middle of a window and will stays in the middle when we resize the window. Notice also that the button is not taking up the whole space as before because of layout.Center. So this is centering one button. We will see next how to center a group of buttons in the middle of a section in a window. We will center 2 buttons in the window. I will be replacing this line that instructs GUI to draw one button by drawing 2 buttons, and since we already have layout.Center above, the expectation is that the 2 buttons will also be centered in the window. As usual, we need a flex as a container to hold 2 rigid that will hold a button each. I will add layout.flex with horizontal axis here, add the first rigid here, and then add a button under it. To add the second rigid, I will copy the first rigid and paste it below it. Change the button pointer and its text. Because we return a value when we create a button, and since we're replacing that with a flex, we also need to return a value after the change. We can now delete the old button command. We need to declare the buttons, run the app. The 2 buttons are horizontally in the middle of the window. Let's change the axis to vertical, and now we can rerun the application. As expected, the buttons are now vertically centered, and they will keep this way even when we resize the window. As a quick summary of layout.Center, we can say it's called with this syntax layout.Center.layout. It has two parameters, the new context GTX and the function func. To use it, we need to wrap the widgets with layout.Center. Here we wrap a flex, so the widget under its children will be centered. Let's forget now about layout.Center a bit and delete the command to center the widgets and switch to another topic. Delete the return layout.flex. Let's add another widget by duplicating the second one. Change the button text and its pointer. I need also to declare the new button. Let's run the app now. As expected, we have 3 stacked buttons. Now let's add some margins around the buttons. Margins are added with layout.Inset. Because it's a struct, we use curly braces. In this case, I'm setting top to 100, which means I'm leaving 100 points of space at the top, 20 on the left, 10 on the right, and 5 at the bottom of the button. Saving the file, we'll add the unit package. Now to use these margins, I will wrap it around the widget, which is here the button. We return margin.layout with the usual parameters GTX and the function. Increase the button indent and close the func function. Let's add the margins around button 2 and 3 as well. Rerun the app. Now each button is now surrounded with the defined margins. Changing the width of the window will extend the width of the buttons to respect the left and right margins. Changing the length of the window doesn't change the position of the buttons because they belong to rigid. Let's try to use flex now. I will keep the first rigid as is with the margins. I will change the second rigid to flexed with weight 1, so it will take up the remaining space. And we don't need the third rigid, so I will delete it. I will also need to delete button 3 as it's not used now. Let's run the application and see what will happen. Same as before, the buttons are distanced from each other. Same as before too, the space between the buttons is kept when the window size is changed. Let's use layout.UniformLayout instead of layout.Inset. Before that, let's use rigids instead of flexed. I will change the flexed to rigid. I will copy and paste the second rigid. Change the button text and the pointer. Declare button 3. Change inset to UniformInset. UniformInset is a function, so I should use parentheses instead of curly braces. In fact, you're calling UniformInset function to construct an inset for you with equal margins. And since it's equal margins, I wouldn't need to use top, left, etc. I will just define an equal margin for all sides. I will run the application now. As expected, the distance is the same on each side of each button. You're seeing the distance between button 1 and button 2 as double between button 1 and the top of the window. This is because we have a space on the bottom of button 1 and the same space on the top of button 2. We will see now another way to add space between widgets. I will delete margins altogether. I mean the declaration of the margins variable and the calls to set the margins. I will use layout.Spacer to add space between the rigids. To do so, I will need to add a rigid with a layout.Spacer inside. Spacer is a struct, so we need to use curly braces. I will set the height or space to 20 points. And we need to add .layout with uppercase L to instruct GUI to render or add this 20 point space inside the widget. What I did here by adding this line is instructing GUI to add a 20 point space before drawing the first button. I will add the same space before the second button and the third button as well. Run the application. Notice that we have the same space between the buttons, which is 20 point. Let's change the buttons to labels now. I will comment layout.button commands and replace them with layout.label for all the buttons. Change the label text for all of them and run the application. Okay, I need to comment out the buttons declaration as we're not using them anymore. Rerun the app. The labels are spaced out uniformly. That's it for this video. We touched upon centering a widget or group of widgets, adding margins around widgets and space between rigid and flexed. In the coming video, we will see some extra details on margins and spacers, and we will build a good looking window using what we saw in this video and the previous one. Please subscribe if you still didn't, like, comment, and share with other people. Thank you.